to deal with questions as we go along. But first, let me try to paint a picture of the subject I've been asked to speak about. First of all, can everyone hear me? Can you maybe just raise your hand? I know you can hear me. Okay, good. Any technical problems, just let me know. We'll try to sort it out. I was asked to speak a little bit about Kabbalah. Kabbalah, I was told you're all black belt Kabbalists. The ladies Kabbalist team, that's what I was told. And so let's see if we can maybe study a little bit of this esoteric and wonderful wisdom. You know, Kabbalah is really the spiritual depth. It's the inner heart of Torah. Abstract, very deep, very powerful ideas that fuel and feed into all that Torah is. I think the easiest way to present the subject is to take an idea. We'll take one Kabbalistic idea and see if we can feel out what it is in its depth, and then feel out its application in the world. So let me make the agenda clear. Kabbalah is the inner heart of Torah, the abstraction deep within. It is usually phrased in terms that are extremely esoteric, abstract. The words themselves are only metaphors for the concepts. You're talking about the deep inner understanding of things. You know, when you know something, you know it in two ways. You know it technically, the words, the logic, the engineering, the mechanics, but you know it inwardly as well. You know what it means. That can never be put into words. Let me ask you again to mute yourself. Somebody's unmuted. I'm getting feedback. Maybe it's Anne. And if you can mute your phone, that'll help me a lot. Thank you. Thank you. You know that you know a thing in two ways. Rabbi Dessler calls this the inner eye and the outer eye. The outer eye is the eye of logic. How would you define the outer eye? It is your senses and your intellectual faculty that can make calculations with those senses. You can register the world around you. You can read details and absorb the details. You can make calculations with those details. Although that's an incredible faculty, it's not uniquely human. Machines can do that. Animals can do that too. Machines can absorb information about the world and they can make calculations. That's not what's uniquely human. What's uniquely human is your ability not just to register items in the world or make calculations, but to understand those things, to know them. That no machine can do. The word we use for this conventionally is das, or dat. Dat means an inner knowledge, a deep inner knowledge. I'm sure I don't need to remind you that when the Torah uses the word dat, it means marital intimacy. Why? Because knowledge means where two things become one. The first time the Torah uses the word dat, it's talking about Adam and Eve's intimate relationship. When you know something with das, the knowledge becomes part of the mind. It's not that the mind registers an external fact. The knower and the known become one. In fact, that knowledge is so intimately deep that if something you know with the das turns out to be false, you would disappear. You would disappear. Let me give you an illustration of that. How do you know that you exist? How do you know you exist? Is it because you can calculate it? Because you can see and taste and touch and smell? If that's the way you know you exist, you're in big trouble. You know you exist deeply, intrinsically. That's called das. And of course, if that knowledge broke down, who would you be? You would disappear. You are your inner knowledge. Ironically and amazingly, all the things that are most important in life, you know only with the inner knowledge. Your own existence. How do you know that you make a moral choice? How do you know that you have free choice? There's no proof for that. No things are right and wrong. Never prove that. You're a skeptical scientist. How do you know that a human is different than an animal? No proof for that. Measure the human being, you get biological measurements. Can't measure the soul, but you know it. You know it inwardly in a way that can never be expressed or proved externally. How do you know you're Jewish, by the way? Is it because you have some technical proofs? Don't you know it at a much deeper level? How do you know you're a woman as opposed to a man? Let me ask you that question. Is it because you make external measurements? No. I know this is a very gender confused generation. I don't know where you people are operating on that spectrum. Maybe you're also confused. I don't know. But there's a deep inner knowledge, which is much more intrinsic. How do you know there's meaning in a relationship as opposed to simply technicalities? None of these can be put into words. The definition of things that are known with the das is that can never be expressed in words. That's why real communication about real depth is impossible. Here's a rule. The more words you need to explain something to somebody, the less chance you have of explaining it. I'm not talking about technicalities. Those can be put into words very easily. Things that are mathematical or technical, Talmudic technicalities, engineering things. If you cannot put those into words, you haven't understood them. But deeper things, the aspects of meaning, can never be put into words. The more words you need to explain something deep and meaningful to somebody, the less chance you have of getting it across. You know how you can really communicate? Only when you don't need words. When two people know each other so deeply that a couple of words, a gesture, a hint is enough, that's real communication. But if you need to start explaining, people live together for 50 years and then begin to realize they never understood in the first place what the other person was saying. I'm referring to men, you understand. Women don't have that problem. Women know what the depth is. Husbands, after many years, discovered that their wife knew what they meant all along, despite what they said. Anyway, that's a different issue. That's a woman's insight. But the point is, the dais is an inner knowledge, something that you have deeper than the words. Kabbalah touches on, reaches into that realm of inner knowledge. The problem, of course, is how can you express those things in words? Can't bring them out into words. So Kabbalah uses metaphors. It uses placeholders. It uses very, very general terminology. Let me put it to you this way. The Mishnah says that the teacher may not teach the student the material when it comes to Kabbalah. That's what the Mishnah says. The Rebbe, the master, teaches the disciple, may not teach him the material, gives him rough ideas and directions, and the student must understand on his own. Why? Is there some sort of a game? No, this is a wisdom that cannot be put into words. No teacher, no master could ever transmit this wisdom to a disciple. There are no words for these things. You talk around the subject long enough till the student gets it. Once you get it, it becomes obvious. There are many things like that in life that cannot be put into words. Let me give you a few examples to feel this out a bit more deeply. You know that the word for Kabbalah in Hebrew, the word we use is sod. Sod means a secret. Ladies, I'm asking you to think a bit more deeply here. We have to reach into realms to make an effort to think about things a bit more deeply than we used to thinking about things. Why is Kabbalah called sod or secret? People think, well, it's a secret because no one told me. It's a secret to me. One day I'll be walking in the old city of Yerushalayim and a wizened white hand will reach out from an alley and an old man with a long white beard will pull me into the alley and he'll tell me the Kabbalistic secrets and then I'll know them. That's very childish. Sod doesn't mean things that you don't happen to know. Sod means things that can never be expressed. It's always a secret. It's a secret because it cannot be put into words, not because nobody happened to tell you. These are things that nobody know. The most articulate words, the most eloquent words can never say these things. They're things you have to know inwardly. No words for these things. All of the most meaningful things in life are like that. You know that here's an example, amazing example. We're about to receive the Torah, right? Giving of the Torah in a couple of days' time. The great exponent, the greatest master in the world, the giver of Torah, Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, could not speak. Could not speak. He had a speech defect. What went wrong? He had some psychological difficulties. He had a problematic parenting. Why did he have a speech defect? What was his psychological problem? He was uniquely created, a divine creation, perfect, transcendent human being. And the one faculty that he really needed was speech. He was the spokesman of the Jewish people. Couldn't speak. The Maharal explains in a classic explanation in Tiferes Yisrael, the Maharal says, Moshe Rabbeinu's speech defect was his perfection. He was holding in a world where things are infinite, can't be put into words. He was operating in a world where each thing makes its infinite connections. It has its godly aspect. Those can't be brought down into the finite package of limited words. They're operating in a world of oneness, where all things reach into their infinite connection. Can't bring those down into words. That's why he couldn't speak. After the Torah was given, he spoke normally. Why? The giving of the Torah was the miraculous meeting of the infinite and the finite. When God appeared, what does it mean that God appeared on the Mount Sinai? Does it mean a big man in the sky with a white beard appeared? It means the infinite met the finite. And the miracle of an infinite wisdom being put into a finite document called the Torah happened. That's what the Torah is. It's a finite document. You can hold it in one hand, you can put it in a book, and yet it contains endless and infinite wisdom. After that miracle occurred, where infinite wisdom can be expressed miraculously in finite words, after that he spoke normally. Sefer Dvarim, which was written by Moshe, how does it begin? Eila Dvarim Asher Diber Moshe. These are the words that he spoke. He was able to speak after that miracle. But beforehand, he could not speak because an aspect of his perfection was reaching above the finite, limited meaning of individual words. I'll give you another example. Some of you may know people who went through the European destruction 70, 80 years ago. Many of you probably do. It's a well-known common phenomenon that many of those people never spoke about their experiences ever. Ever, not a word. Many times you ask people, your grandmother, your auntie, never said a word about it. Young people misunderstand that. Young people think those old people never spoke about it because it was too painful. That's not the reason. They didn't speak about it not because it was too painful, but because it was impossible. There was no way to put those things into words. Where do you begin? How do you begin to put into words? Here's your grandchild asking you a question about what you went through. How do you begin putting into words a nation that is highly sophisticated and intelligent, prides itself on its kindliness and its logical social structures, decides to murder its own citizens in cold blood? You know that murdering citizens is a war crime. Your own citizens, your own civilians, mow them down, gas them how do you, millions upon millions of, and the world stands by idly, and how do you, there's no way to begin. To put it into words would you trivialize it. By the way, the converse is also true. When people have a pain too big to bear, and you get them to start speaking, it can be very therapeutic, and the words pour out. Because then something infinite and too large to bear starts to take on certain measured proportions. It's these words, very, very therapeutic. It's the flip side of the same idea. Let me tell you another idea connected with this. When something's very meaningful to you, deeply meaningful, touches your soul, the worst thing you can do is talk about it. If you talk about it, you may lose it. Because if it has infinite connections, if it touches you at a level beyond the finite words, and you spit it out in finite words, you've limited it. You've brought it down into that package of words. The great exponent of Mussar, Rav Simcha Zissel, he once waited 25 years before teaching his son something that moved him very deeply. He said he was concerned that if he spoke it, he might lose it. Isn't that amazing? You know, most of us, we're built in such a way that when we hear something deep and meaningful, the first thing you do is have to share that with somebody. I've got to tell that I have that problem. I'm a teacher. I love to share Torah. When I hear something incredibly deep, I have to find somebody to tell. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. Let it seep in, percolate. Let it find an infinite connection within you before you spit it out in some finite words. There's an inner world that needs to be built before you share externalities. The inner world is far larger, must be far larger than anything that can be externalized. This is an idea that runs through all of Torah, all inner wisdom. Kabbalah is a deep reaching into the inner recesses of things that can never be put into words. It's deeply developing of the personality. Let me bring this down to a slightly more practical application. Let's say you meet a friend, a new person, you never met this person before. You like the person, you go out for a kosher cappuccino somewhere in the kosher shopping mall. The person leans across the table and in 20 minutes, they tell you all about themselves. That's all they are, 20 minutes of talk. That's not a relationship. A relationship that is meaningful is somebody that the more you get to know them, the more you realize you never discovered. For everything that can be expressed in the world, there must be an untold hidden depth, a well of depth. For everything you say in the world, everything you reveal in a relationship, there must be much more. A teacher, for example, for every item that a teacher teaches, there must be an unlimited well of depth, of maturity and knowledge way beyond what can be expressed right now. Otherwise, you're limiting yourself to these finite words. You know, we live in a world that is totally expressed in external expression. External, lots of talk. Where's the depth of thought and knowledge that goes beyond the words? One of the great writers of the last century, C.S. Lewis, a non-Jewish writer, he said, we live in a cataract of nonsense. It's a world of media, talk. Many people can't bear silence. They're on their own for a while, isolated in lockdown. Or they're driving in their car. They've got to switch on the radio to hear somebody talking. Who's talking? Some fool who knows nothing about the subject at all. Calling in people from the community who know even less. You've got to listen to somebody talking. What about your own inner voice? And you know what the tragedy is? How do we think? We have a conversation with ourselves. We talk, and we're often not even listening. We're thinking what we're going to answer before we've even heard. There's a knowledge, a deep knowledge that must go far beyond. a cheap talk show that's going on in your mind. There must be a silent meditational deep knowledge long before the words can be sought. You don't know yourself in words. You know yourself as you are. Let me give you a fantastic illustration of this. And if this doesn't move you, there's probably no hope for you. I heard this from Rav Moshe Shapiro. He said, I'll tell you the way I heard it because it's beyond belief. He said when he was 11 years old, he mentioned that in passing. He was raised in Tel Aviv. Rav Moshe Shapiro, our great teacher for the last generation, one of the greatest thinkers of the Jewish people. He was raised in Tel Aviv. He told us that he used to go on Shabbos afternoon to a minyan. There was a minyan of Hasidim. They were working people, simple working people, and so on Shabbos they used to look like malachim. And Shabbos afternoon at Shalosh Shudas, he was a child, 11 years old. They traded ideas. They would talk, Vertlach, Torah ideas. He said one Shabbos afternoon, it happened to be Pasha Shmini, and one of the elderly Hasidim shared an idea. It was an idea about the Haftarah. And I'll tell you what he said. The fact that an 11-year-old could absorb this idea is beyond my capacity to understand. That is completely beyond me. But nevertheless, he said it was very meaningful to him. And I'll tell you what he said. Here's what this elderly Chassid said. You know, the Haftarah of Shmini describes King David HaMelech, bringing the Aron, the Ark, up to Yerushalayim. It was an ecstatic event. The Aron had been outside Jerusalem for a certain amount of time. And David, in preparation for building the Beis HaMikdash, brought it up to Jerusalem. As the Aron was being, this is particularly meaningful to me because I live in Telstone. Right now, I'm stuck in England. But my home is in Telstone, and that's called Kiryat Ye'arim. And it was one of the places that the Aron stopped on its journey up to Yerushalayim. That's what made Telstone famous originally. But anyway, be that as it may. Be that as it may. On this journey to bring the Aron to Yerushalayim, King David was dancing ecstatically in the presence of the Aron. He was dancing with tremendous joy. Mecharker b'chol oz, it says, with all his strength, he was dancing in the street, in ecstasy, in being able to bring up the Aron of Hashem to Yerushalayim. His wife, Michal, nishkafa ba'ad, she was watching out of the window. Vativez lei beliba, she despised him in her heart. Listen carefully to what's going on here. Michal saw King David dancing in the street, and she despised him. Dr. Howard, Dr. Tzvi, it's nice to have you with me. I think you're sneaking in here in an illicit fashion, but it's a pleasure to pleasure to have you. I see you are really gender confused, but it's okay. Anyway, be that as it may. So she looked out of the window. She saw her husband dancing in the street, and she despised him. King David, king of the Jewish people, dancing in the street. And listen to how cutting her words were. She said, you danced in the street when he got home. She said to him, you exposed yourself in an undignified fashion. Ke'echad harekim. Can you imagine those words? Like one of the empty fellows, accusing King David of having danced in such an ecstatic fashion that it was unbecoming to him. Not just undignified. Ke'echad harekim, like one of the empty people. Can you imagine saying that to David HaMelech? And David said to her, "Kaloisi oid mizos, I will belittle myself even more than that. You accuse me that in the eyes of the maidservants of the Jewish people, I exposed myself in a fashion that was undignified. In the eyes of those same maidservants, I will reveal myself even more for Hashem's glory. Right? I will go even further." And the section ends, the parsha ends by saying, Michal Bashal, and Michal, Saul's daughter, Lo haya lav vlad, she never had a child, ad yom mois, until the day of her death. The simple translation is, she never had a child till she died. The Mefarshim said it means she died in childbirth. What is this? What is this discussion? Let's understand here. This is Torah. Here's a husband and wife having a little argument. She thinks he behaved in an undignified fashion. It wasn't royal enough. King David tells her for Hashem's honor, it was perfectly fitting. This is Tanakh. This is not a husband-wife quibble about some. Listen to what this chassid said. When David danced in the street, Michal was not concerned because you could see his ankles or you could see his knees. She was concerned because you could see his neshama. That's unforgivable. When a person exposes themselves, reveals themselves fully in the world, you empty yourself out. You are all that you are has been expressed in the world. You've taken all your infinite spiritual soul depth and expressed it in the world as something that can be expressed in a finite world. You've disconnected yourself from your source. You've revealed yourself fully in the world, and you've cut yourself off from an infinite source, from that which can never be revealed in the world. That's unforgivable. That is, we're not talking about your knees or your ankles. We're talking about disconnecting yourself from an infinite source. You've become that person who's told you all about themselves in 20 minutes of conversation. That's all there is. That's where the relationship ends. For everything you can talk about in the world, there must be much more wisdom that can never be put into words. For everything that you can reveal in a relationship, there must be far more that can never be revealed, far more depth and emotion and feeling and meaning. When she watched King David, David's dance must have been ecstatic. It must have been an expression of pure spiritual fire. You know that dance. Every human movement is a revelation of internal depth. Speech is only the most refined and particular articulate, but every gesture is a revelation of meaning. The Talmud says you can see if a person's wise by the way they walk. Dance is where the whole body is illuminated. The whole body is speaking its inner message. And when she saw him dancing in the street, she saw to the bottom of his soul, or so she thought. Emptied yourself out in those Jerusalem streets. Unforgivable. You are our nation's point of connection with Hashem. You are always the one who's maintaining a depth, a connection to that wellspring of Torah and meaning. When you spit yourself out and disconnect yourself and reveal all that you are in the world, you've ceased to become human. You become part of the natural world. And David said to her, you think that's all there is? You think I've forgotten that message? There's so much more depth that you never realized there is, that was unrevealed. That was the conversation between them. I went over to Rav Moshe after this talk, and I was usually too afraid to speak to him, but on this occasion I tried. I said, is it possible that's why she died in childbirth? In other words, she accused him of having emptied himself out of spiritual life completely, and that's what happened to her. She had to bring life to the world. It required an emptying of life itself from her. Rav Moshe agreed. When I say agreed, he didn't say anything. By him, that was strong agreement. If it was wrong, he would have, singed me and charred me, but be that as it may. What have we learned here? We've learned that there's an inner depth that is far beyond words. We live in a generation of such superficiality, such triviality, such a cataract of nonsense where everything has to be spoken, and there's no connection to meaning. When you absorb an idea that's beautiful, or appreciate something in a relationship, a moment of silence, at least a moment of silence. The Gemara says the way you learn this, the Mishnah says the way you learn this skill is from silence. There's one thing isolation should be teaching us, is to retreat into the inner world of silence. The Mishnah actually says, I studied with the sages, I sat at their feet, and I never learned anything as good as the quality of silence. Rav Shapiro used to say how that they taught him by their silence. They didn't tell him that silence was important. He learned it by silence. Once I arrived at a shir, Moshe Shapiro was giving us a shir. It was years ago. And people used to record the shirim. They used to record them on little cassette recorders. Most of you are probably too young to know what that is. A cassette recorder, there was a thing called a cassette. Today, no one knows what that is. So one of the fellows arrived at the shir, and he had a cassette recorder that was called VOR, Voice Operated Recording. It was a newfangled gadget. And the way this little machine worked was you pressed the button and it ran and recorded. But if the speaker was silent, the machine stopped. The cassette stopped to save space. And then when the person started speaking, it was voice activated, it would continue. So he put this thing on the table and it made this clicking noise. So Moshe turned to the student and he said to him, what is this? So he said, Moshe, this is a voice activated recorder. It cuts out the pauses. Moshe said to the student, the pauses are part of the shir. The silence is a very important part of the shir. You're cutting out the silences. The Gemara says when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shamayim, when Hashem taught him Torah, there were pauses between the parshas. You know why our Sefer Torah is written with gaps between the sections? To teach you that when Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah, there were moments of silence. You're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses in heaven learning from Hashem. Hashem taught him and they remained silent for Moshe to absorb. There's an absorption. There's an allowing of the material to connect with your neshama. There needs to be a pause. Let me tell you something beautiful. I'm sure you ladies are into Talmudic study one way or another, so I'll tell you a little piece of Talmud I hope you'll enjoy. Listen to how beautiful this is. The Talmud says, Mila mila besela, mila besela. A word is worth a seller. Let's call it $1. Let's call it a shekel. Okay, a shekel. Mila is worth a shekel. Mashtuka betray, and silence is worth 2. Listen, ladies, carefully. It's a beautiful thing to understand. The Gemara says a word is worth 1 shekel, and silence is worth 2. So the Chazon Ish once was testing a young man, very talented, up-and-coming young Talmudic genius, and the Chazon Ish wanted to test him. So he said to this young, up-and-coming Talmud Chacham, he said to him, the Gemara says, Mila besela, shtika betray. The Gemara says, a word is worth 1, and silence is worth 2. So tell me, please, which is worth more? That was the question the Chazon Ish asked this young man. Now, let's understand. The Talmud says very clearly, words are worth 1, silence is worth 2. Very clear which is worth more. Chazon Ish said to this young man, so which is worth more? So this young Talmud Chacham thought about it, and he said, well, what's he asking me? He certainly doesn't want me to say the obvious answer. You're not asking me for the obvious answer. He said, words are worth more. It says a word is worth only 1, and silence is worth 2. He said, no, words are worth more. So the Chazon Ish said, what do you mean? He said, because each word is worth 1. Silence is worth 2, but you can only be silent once. Every word you say, you get 1 shekel for. You can only be silent once. Chazon Ish said, that's exactly wrong. That's exactly what I wanted to show you. The Talmud means what it says. You know what it means? It means you get paid a shekel for every word. And for every word you do not say, you get paid 2. Not just 1 silence. For every wise word that you've managed to withhold, there's a payment for each one of those. Anyway, this is an introduction to some of the thoughts about the inner wisdom. Let me ask you if you have any questions before we move on. If you don't, I'll move on to describe just one Kabbalistic idea as a way of illustrating something that is deeper, that is difficult to put into words, but at least we'll make an effort. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'm sure you're all trying very hard to practice silence, and I'm sure that's the reason why you're not asking questions, and that's that's wonderful. I don't have that luxury. Let's move further and discuss just one idea, maybe in one way the most fundamental, which is vested in the Kabbalistic teaching. And I'll share with you just one idea, which appears on the very first page of the great work known as the Eitz Chaim. The Eitz Chaim is the great work written by Reb Chaim Vital. It's a documentation of the things that he learned from his master, the Arizal. The Arizal came to Tzfas in 1572. He died in 1574. He was only 39 years old. And he left us with the most definitive body of teaching on Kabbalah. That is a definitive commentary on the Zohar. And that work is known as the Eitz Chaim. It's extremely difficult. It has 50 sections, each one more difficult than the next. But I'll tell you what it says on the very first page. Let's try to explore at least this idea. And I'll leave you with this to ponder and think about and chew over during your silent periods on Shavuot. Here's what it says on the first page. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but at least to try to convey the idea. The Eitz Chaim says that every time a light shines in the world, it shines twice. Lights shine twice in the world. What do we mean by lights? Why do we use that metaphor? Each element obviously needs a lot of explanation. But let me tell you at least one theme here. Lights shine in the world. You probably know, I'm sure, that much of Kabbalistic teaching is phrased as lights of various types. After all, the world is a revelation. It's a gilui. The world is a revelation of what Hashem is. That's what light is. Light is the medium of revelation. That's why light has such fantastic scientific parameters, far beyond human understanding. So let's call it a light. You realize we're talking about things far beyond material, physical phenomenon of light. But we use that metaphor. When lights shine in the world, they always shine twice. There's the first light and the second light. What is the meaning of this? The first light is always incredibly powerful, infinitely powerful. The first light has no limitations. This is known as the Or Rishon, the first light. It's so powerful because it needs to open a space where there was no space before. That's what the light does. It punches open a space and creates a space. Once the light has done that, it goes back to where it came from. That's the withdrawal of the light. That's called an Or Chayze. These things all have technical terminologies. But the light goes back to where it came from. After all, it's done its job. It's done its job. It's created a space. Then a second light arrives. That's called the Or Sheni, the second light. The second light comes into the space that was formed by the first light. The second light is nothing compared to the first. Very, very fine. Described as only a thin, tiny beam of light coming into the space that was created by the first light. The second light is almost nothing, but it's the one that remains, the one that was intended and the one that remains. Now, what is this abstract description? What is it telling us? Like all Kabbalistic teaching, extremely abstract, hard to understand what it's applying to. What is the relevance of this? Why is this idea behind all of Torah and behind all of life? What does it mean? First light, second light. First light, perfect. Second light, very, very faint, almost indiscernible. First light, amazing, but does not last. Second light, very, very faint and weak, but it's the one that lasts. What does this mean? Let me give you a few examples of this abstract principle, and I'll try to convince you that this is the pattern of everything you ever experience. Everything, whether it's in raising a child or in marriage or understanding a verse in Torah, or understanding any aspect of the world or in growing old, any phenomenon in the world is encapsulated in this idea. And understanding it can make a difference to anything and everything that you do in the world. Let me give you a few examples, and I hope it will become clear. Let's begin from the philosophical realm, and then we'll bring it down into the practical realm. Let's begin with the philosophical parallel to this idea. All that happens in the world has two stages. First the potential, and then the actual. Think about it for a moment. Before anything can be in the world, it must be possible. The way the Kabbalists would say it is, before any object can exist, it must have a place. No object can exist unless it has a space. First is the space, and then the object occupies the space. In sequence of events in the world, first the thing must be possible, and then it happens. If it's not possible, it cannot happen. The possibility precedes the event. We say first the potential, and then the actual. We say to convert min hakoach el hapoel, to convert from the potential to the actual. The potential, here comes the message, pay attention. The potential is always perfect. It's amazing. It's an infinite light. The actual is never perfect. Never perfect. Let's think about this for a moment. You wake up in the morning. The day is ahead of you in potential. It's perfect. There are millions of things you could do today, and they're all perfect. Nothing's gone wrong yet. At the end of the day, where you collapse exhausted in bed, how much of that potential became real? A very small amount. A very small amount. But that's the one that remains. That became real. Let me try to say this again. The potential is always wonderful and amazing. By the way, you may enjoy knowing this. According to Kabbalah, the potential is male, the actual is female. The potential is male. The male is always endless, endless potential. The male is infinite, endless potential. We refer to Hashem as male. He's all possibilities. The world is finite and limited. It's called female. The word nekeva, which means feminine in Hebrew, means to make limited, to make specific. We read it in this week's parsha, Asher nikvu b'shemot, the ones who are specified by name. The beauty of the male is endless, infinite potential. The curse of the male is only potential. The beauty of the female, the wondrous nature of the female, she brings birth to the world. She makes things real. The curse of the female, only this one. All the others that could have been are no longer. Are we getting somewhere, ladies? Am I making some sense? Are we together on this? Raise your hand, maybe. Yeah. Some of you look like you're in a bit of a stupor, but I hope I'm getting through. You know, I'll never forget the experience as a medical student of having to dissect a human embryo. Amazing experience. Little human embryo, unborn. You know how it's formed? The organs that form seed in the male and female child, they begin as part of the kidneys. These organs, they break off from the kidneys and they start migrating down in the body. In the male, they become organs that form seed by the billion. In the woman, the ovaries form seeds, eggs, one at a time only. The male forms billions, the woman forms one at a time only. When a fertilization takes place, the male gives 15 billion and the woman gives one egg only. Now, you know the word for a mother in Hebrew is aim. Aim means im, if. If it's up to her, she decides. He's a blast of potential. She's the defining characteristic. She makes, again, the female is the one that makes it specific. She brings life to the world with danger and risk and crisis. The male's not like that. The male is a explosion of potential, which is all perfect. Infinite potential. The world is a finite reality, limited but real. And therefore the first light is infinite and endless. It contains all things, but it goes away. It never lasts. It never lasts. How is a child conceived? The father gives half a genetic code, that's all. The mother walks the long walk through pregnancy, brings it into being, extended in space and time with all the difficulty. I'm not trying to put you off place. I'm sure you'll wonderful experience. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But be that as it may. That is the nature of potential and actual. The potential is always wonderful and amazing, endless, dreamlike. But when the potential is given away for the real, you have on the one hand a constriction, a shrinking down. On the other hand, something real. Let's turn to more tangible examples. Let me try to show you that everything in the world has these two phases. Let's take, for example, Pesach and Shavuot. Let's talk about Pesach and Shavuot. What is Pesach? Two phases. First, the Jewish people are exposed to a blaze of miracles. Unbelievable experience of miraculous in Egypt, 10 plagues, each one higher than the next. You know that the plagues in Egypt are a crescendo experience, each one building on the next, till you reach the 10th plague where Hashem appears himself in Egypt. Ani v'lo malach, ani v'lo saraf, I myself, an unprecedented experience of spiritual voltage. 7 days later, it gets even better when the sea splits and the Jewish people see into the 7th level of the spiritual world. Unbelievable thing. How much work are they doing for this? Zero. They're sitting back and watching the show. That's called the first light. It's automatic and it's perfect. No work, no suffering, no walking the long walk of difficult experience. That's the experience in Egypt. And in that moment, after the sea splits and they see things that no prophet will ever see again, then the surprise takes place. And that light recedes. And they find themselves in a desert where they have to walk one step after another through a desert of difficulty, counting each individual day to reach a Sinai, which is an experience of mature relationship. Let's understand this again. The Egyptian experience is miracles. That's called a first light. You know, the pattern is this. First lights are always there to make the possibilities open up. That's what the first light does. Hashem demonstrates. Watch, get the message. These are miraculous experiences. This is who I am, and this is the way it's done. As soon as you get the message, Hashem steps back and says, now let's see you do it yourself. That's always the purpose of the two stages. Stage one is inspiration, lifts you to the possibilities, inspires you and shows you what you're capable of. The second stage is always when that's taken away. Now you do it. You know, when the father teaches his child to walk, lifts up the little baby by his hands, child stands on his feet for the first time, his Abba's holding his hands. What an amazing experience. He's standing, he's being supported by his father, he takes his first amazing step. What an exhilarating experience. And not only that, he's completely safe. His father's holding his hands. And as he takes that first step, Abba, let's go. Then the child there stands there terrified and alone, abandoned by the one who put him in that situation. But that's when he learns to walk. It's when the father steps back and the inspiration's over. That's when you become real. The point of the world is to have a first light inspiration so the possibility opens up, so you see what you can be. Then Hashem steps back and says, I didn't create the world to demonstrate myself. I created the world for you to become real. Let's see, you want to meet me as a lover at Sinai, that he should kiss us with the kisses of his mouth? We meet as equals. How do we meet as equals? First, I do it all for you. And then I step back and I let you become real. So we meet as two individuals who are independently valuable. You know, the month of Pesach, the month of Nisan, is miraculous. Nisan means miracles. It's a wonderful and amazing experience. Nisan is the experience, the zodiac of the month, the mazal of the month is the sheep. The sheep simply follows passively, none of its own strength. The next month, Iyar in the desert, that's the month of the ox, the bull. That develops its own will, doesn't follow at all, completely opposite characteristic, completely opposite personality. First is the giver doing it all. And then there's the receiver who must become real. And what's the third month that we just entered now when the Torah is given? Sivan, which is Gemini. To'emim, twins, the perfect harmony of the two tablets of the law, written in the oral law, Hashem and us, Moshe and Aaron, all the dualities of love coming together. It's always like that. Stage one, it's done for you. You know what Pesach means? To leap over. On Pesach, you leap to the 50th level with no intervening steps. The Kabbalists say that on the first night of Pesach, you can have anything you want. It's a miraculous night. You leave your door unlocked. Whatever you want, you can have. And then you have to pay. After the first night of inspiration, leaping to the 50th level, now you count each painful step only one at a time. This is what you call fly now, pay later. You want to meet me as an equal at Sinai? Hashem does it all for you for free. And then he steps back. How did your father teach you to ride a bicycle? He ran along next to you holding the saddle, and it was wonderful. Then you look back and you saw he wasn't holding anymore. But that's where you learn to ride. First, it has to be done for you. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the idea. Let me give you another example. That was a national example of the birth of the Jewish people. Miraculous free gift and then the hard work. Let's take an individual example. I hope that by the time we finish this discussion, you'll see there's nothing else in the world but this pattern. How is a child born? Begins in the womb. Miraculous experience. The Gemara says the child is taught the whole Torah in the womb for free. He has an angel, teaches him the whole Torah. He has cosmic wisdom. He knows his future. He knows the whole Torah. There's no wisdom like that. And on the point of birth, the angel gives him a sharp blow and he forgets it all. And he's born a simple child, a baby in the world, knowing nothing. Why? Why would Hashem teach a child? Why does he have an angel teach the child the whole Torah? And when you really need it, when you're about to enter the world and you'll really need the wisdom, it's all taken away. The answer is first stage and second stage. First stage, free, infinite light. A child in the womb, it's all done for you. All that wisdom is given to inspire you and make you aware of what you're capable of. And then you're born in the world, it's all taken away. The first light goes back to where it came from. Now you make it real. Now you walk the walk through the desert of life and acquire the wisdom. But you can do it because you had it once. This is why when you learn something spiritually true in the world, you don't have a sense of learning, you have a sense of recognition. You say, I know that's true. How do you know it's true? Because it's resonating with the deep inner wisdom. A good teacher doesn't put information in. A good teacher draws it out. Indoctrination is the wrong form of teaching. Education, drawing it out of the student. When the students ask the Rebbe a question in the Talmud, he doesn't answer. He says, what do you think? A good teacher, your job as a teacher is to draw it out as a parent, if you're a parent. Your job is not to stuff material in. Your job is to draw it out. Help the child develop. Bring out that inner capacity, that inner wisdom. It takes maturity to know what their capacity is. What is that potential? To have seen it and to bring it out, not to put it in. On the contrary, to fathom the natural capacities, to fathom, to go back in time and understand what this child's original inspiration was, and to bring that out. That's what a teacher does, is to bring out the inner depth. But it's all locked within. The Gaon of Vilna says something which is beyond exquisite. He quotes a medrash that says that when a person dies, 3 angels come to greet you. 3 angels come to greet you as you move down that channel from this world to the next. 1 angel comes to add up all your mitzvahs. 1 angel comes to add up all your averos, all your sins. And the 3rd angel comes to see what you have become. Where's your Torah? If you're a man, essentially it's your Torah learning. If you're a woman, essentially it's your Torah practice in the world. This 3rd angel comes to see what you've amounted to through a lifetime. Says the Gaon of Vilna, as that 3rd angel approaches you, you recognize his face. Turns out to be the one who learnt with you before you were born. And now he's come to see at the end of your life. Did you do it? There was phase 1. I gave it to you for free. We shared it together. You had it all. And then I stepped back for you to actualize it yourself and bring it out yourself. And now at the end of your life, did you do that? That incredible potential that you had that I gave you. That abstract, infinite, and endless potential that you were then, that receded from you. Did you fathom through it again? Did you dig deep and bring it out? And this is the pattern of all life. I'm sure you ladies are thinking ahead of me and you've already thought through all of life's experiences and you've seen it's like that. Isn't a marriage like that? Don't we have 2 phases, one called romance and one called love? What is romance? It's a free gift. It's an amazing swirl of emotion and experience, but after you get married, about 2.5 hours after you get married, but it's meant to be that way. There's first the chemical thrill of, where'd that come from? You haven't shared anything yet, but the world is built that way. There's first the explosion of potential, and it needs to be that way. That's the inspiration. And the skill is, can you walk through the long desert of life's experience, taking that with you? Can you hark back always to that and keep it real? In his classic work of Torah and philosophy, the Rambam says this. He says, life is like standing on a dark plain on a stormy night. You stand there beaten by the rain, lashed by the wind, and hopelessly lost in the darkness. And suddenly at your moment of greatest despair, there's an unexpected flash of lightning. And that instant of lightning, you see the road ahead clearer than by day. And as you see it, the lightning disappears. And the rest of the night, you walk through the storm on memory alone of a flash of clarity that you once had. No one walks in the light. Some people see more flashes and some people see less, but no one walks in the light. That's what emunah is, by the way. Speaking about ladies' section of Torah. That's called emunah. Emunah means loyalty. It means ne'eman. There's a flash of clarity that's incredible. That's Sinai. The Jewish people see that. We're blown away by that. Lifted into another world. Then there's the long walk, what the Ramban calls Midbar Ha'amim, the desert of the nations, with all its torture and anti-Semitism and brutality. Year after year, century after century. And in the last 2,000 years, no miracles at all. Post-prophetic era, total darkness, we see nothing. But we have a memory of a flash of light that happened once at Sinai. And every year we revisit that and make it real with a woman's loyalty. Can't rely on a man for that. The man is the flash of inspiration. That's where he lives. It's the womanly art of walking the long walk of a pregnancy until Mashiach, which is called a birth. Chevle Mashiach, which is the birth pains of Mashiach. You all have to be a woman for that experience. And therefore we have again two phases. The first phase is called the written Torah. That was the phase of prophecy when Hashem revealed himself openly. He spoke openly, that's called prophecy, and he revealed himself openly, that's called miracles. And 2,300 years ago, when the womanly phase began, Esther the woman, Esther meaning the hidden one, introduced the phase of hiddenness in the world, from which time we've seen no revealed miracles and no written Torah and no prophets, introduced the phase of the oral law. And I'm sure you know Torah was accepted twice. Once at Pesach in a blaze of glory and miracles, Pesach and Shavuot. And then the world went dark. And then we accepted Torah at Purim in the darkness when there were no revealed miracles, where it took the depth of perception to see that there will be a birth one day, despite the fact that it's no longer obvious. I wrote a book about this recently. I might as well show you. Why shouldn't I promote my own book? There's a book you can read. That's called As Dawn Ends the Night. I hope you like the artwork. My wife did it. This is a painting she did for the cover. This book is about how the written law leads to the oral law when the spiritual light is hidden. By the way, in the back of this book, my son produced a beautiful chart of Jewish history. This is a chart that shows, can I show it to you on the screen? This is a chart that shows, chart that pulls out, you see, and you can show all the stages of Jewish history with all the personalities who've lived, when they lived, and who lived at the same time. And on the back, it has a demonstration of all the great Torah authorities for all the, hard to show you on the screen, but get the book. In fact, if you get 2 copies, then you'll understand it very well. But be that as it may, those are the 2 phases. Okay, I think I've been speaking too much, but I hope we get the idea. Let's summarize. Kabbalah, the inner depth of Torah, the inner eye, the unspoken and unspeakable aspects of Torah. Each abstract idea is a very potent source of whole areas of Torah. And we chose today just to study one of them, the phase of inspiration and uplift, and then the phase when that's taken away. And instead of having 50 stages in one, you make one step at a time. Just like music. Music is played one note at a time, each one completely insignificant, trivial, ridiculously meaningless. A plink and a plonk and a plonk and a plink. When the plonks and plinks are put together, you get something called music, something that far transcends the parts. You walk through the desert one step at a time, and all you can do is put the steps together and the destination arrives. That is the third light. There's the first light, which is infinite, but it's free. It's not real. It's a romantic illusion, but it's necessary. It shows you the goal and what's possible, and that's taken away. Then you walk the walk through the desert one step at a time, and then what emerges at the end is something that is a combination of the first phase of inspiration and the second phase of work, but one that you have brought into being, one that you have given birth to. Oh, name of my book again. Yes, it's called As Dawn Ends the Night. As Dawn Ends the Night. Any good Jewish bookstore, you can get this book, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Any questions before we close, ladies? Mr. Shashu, any questions, anything?
Okay.
Let me read 1 or 2 questions on the screen, if you don't mind.
If you have a question, I've unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Yes, feel free to ask or type it up on my screen.
A long time to get rid of it.
If someone's speaking, I can't hear you. Okay, let me wish you a wonderful Shavuot. and I'm sure you've all been motivated to study some Kabbalah. Not a bad idea, why not? But yes.
I sent you a couple questions on your screen.
Which one? About men and women doing two things at the same time?
Yeah.
Your question is Oragonus. Oh, good. So let's start with that. The Oragonus is the hidden light. That's the first light. Indeed, quite explicitly. We know that when Hashem created the world originally, he created with a light so powerful that it would leave you with no free will. A light of creation. And the Medrash says he hid it because it would be the wicked people use that light, destroy the world. The deeper reason also is that the righteous also should not have that light in the world because that takes away your free will. So it's a first light, it becomes a hidden light, and the Messianic era when we've worked to earn it and bring it back into the world, we'll have that light again, indeed.
That first light is the first light that shattered the vessels. Is that, you know what I'm talking about?
That's another story. That's another story.
Okay.
The shattering of the vessels, let's put it in your terms. The breaking of the vessels is the receding of the light, indeed. The light comes in, it cannot remain. It's so powerful it breaks the vessels. And then we rebuild the vessels. Indeed. Well, we can't study every Kabbalistic idea in one session. Men and women, indeed, we need male and female within each of us. Of course, you need that marriage, that internal marriage. You need the logical and the inspirational, and you need I would say this, the male faculty is the head and clarification. The female is the faculty of bringing it down into emotion and action. That's the hard part, by the way. Getting the truth clear is one problem, but it's living up to it, bringing it down into action, that is more difficult. I have a talk on that. You can access it. Go to simpletoremember.com. There's a talk there called Truth and Faith, Male and Female, that goes into that in more detail. Okay. Yes, indeed. That's a very good question. As we move away from Sinai, there's a decline. There's also an elevation. As we interpret halacha ourselves and stand on the shoulders of previous generations. Amazing, indeed. Yes, of course, that's a wonderful idea. There's a paradox in Jewish history that as we become smaller, or as the Kabbalists would say, we move towards the feet. And now we are called ikvas de Mashiach. We have the thick, dead skin on the bottom of the feet in our generation. That's the teaching. We are now no more than the feet. But although we are so much smaller, indeed we stand on the shoulders of giants. That's a classic phrase that is echoed through history. Like dwarves on the shoulders of giants. In one way we see more. There's a lot of writing about that in the writings of Tzadok HaKohen. Okay, ladies, thank you very much for this opportunity to study together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Have a
Very
wonderful.
much.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Brilliant as always.
Wonderful Shavuot, and I'm sure the
Thank you very much.
entire expression.
Thank you, Rabbi Tatz. Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Tatz.
Joyce.
Ask one Kameach.
Too late.
So much.
Just before we go, ladies, I would just like to let you know that next week, Amidst Hashem, we are going to have Tales of Teshuvah from the ashram to Beit Shemesh. So I will send a link. I will send a link next week, so you will have the link. Okay, so meanwhile, I wish you Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful hug, and thank you all for joining us and lots of inspiration.
You will be
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you all.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.
Samea. Bye.
Thank you, Joyce.
Bye.
Joyce, who will be giving that chair?
Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne.
Hi.
Hi, Yvonne. Welcome.
Rocky Rosenfeld.
So nice to see Yvonne. Yeah.
Who am I looking at? I can recognize the voice, but I
Yvonne
can't
again. Hi,
see.
Yvonne. From
Okay.
England.
Meeting.
Wow.
Chag Sameach to all.
Hi. Chag Sameach all. Bye.